Ahimsa, being non-violence, and obviously showing, asking them, do you think this is ahimsa? Clearly it's not. Also I talk about asteya, which means non-stealing. So for example, a lot of Indians will say, oh, we live with the cows and we let the babies stay with their mothers and we don't take them away, and we only take the milk that the baby doesn't drink, for example. At which point we then say, that's still asteya. It's still stealing. So getting them to connect with those values they already hold in their hearts.
I think when we're outreaching people from India that are living in the West, what we tend to do is say, okay, not that we're excusing what happens in their home country, of course, but right here in Canada or Australia or wherever we are, and we're at a queue, this is exactly what's happening in the industry. When you go to the store and you buy milk, it's not coming from the cow in your family's farm. Not that makes it okay anyway, but this is the reality of what's happening. And so I think some people might think that it's still okay, like everywhere does it the same, but it's not. I did read just like today or the other day that India was becoming the first nation that wants to recognize animals as persons.
Elephants.
Sorry?
Elephants as persons.
Elephants. Yeah, I think I've already done dolphins, right?
Yes, I think that dolphins came out a few years ago.
Yeah, but I read something more recently, like they were trying to make personhood for all animals. So
there's also a YouTube video on the dairy industry in India, which shows that it is equally as bad as it is in Western countries. Obviously, they use a lot of buffalo milk there, as opposed to the traditional dairy cows.
And I think you can also, in that case, actually, although I said like stay away from health too much, but that is actually a good example where you could talk about health because the
rates of type 2 diabetes is skyrocketing. Obviously, it's related to saturated fat. The number one source of saturated fat in the US diet, at least, is dairy. And in India, I know dairy is a huge part of the Indian diet because we've been there 3 times ourselves. I also talk about how India is one of the largest exporters of dairy and also one of the largest exporters of leather.
So there is scope. But I agree, it can be a little trickier with some parts of the world trying to get them to not be so desensitized. Yeah.
So I have a few things to say, and maybe I should start with the stuff that isn't going to get me kicked out.
So what was your name?
So my name is Michael.
Oh, Michael.
I want to say something about what do you say if people say that they don't care even if it is a dog in the slaughterhouse. And that to me is a huge opportunity because you've taken them to the place where they're saying, I don't care. And I think that's the only time that they're being honest. And I've given an entire talk just on the I don't care line and how to answer that. And I've found that the best way to answer that is to force a change in perspective, to put them in the place of the animals. What if it were you? How would you feel? How do you think that cow right there is feeling? And would you feel the same way? And then they'll say, I want someone to help me, I want to get out of there, but I don't care if it's others. Then you ask them, what is your purpose in life? Is it to satisfy your sensory pleasures or to be a better person? And remind them that the purest form of happiness comes from continuously improving how you treat others. And that answer, that I don't care answer, I wouldn't even care about this dog, that's the biggest opportunity that we have as outreachers. The second thing I want to say is Wayne Chung's video, he makes a lot of mistakes and he's very ignorant about history when he talks about Martin Luther King. The biggest mistake that he makes is, and the most important, is that he doesn't understand the definition that Martin Luther King was using when he spoke about direct action. The definition Martin Luther King used was directly challenging the laws that were keeping people down. The example of sit-ins, he was directly challenging the laws that kept black people out of restaurants. He was directly challenging the laws of forcing people to the back of the bus by sitting in the front of the bus, Rosa Parks was. The difference between that and what we are doing is that we're not, except when we go in, except when Jack and I haven't done this, but except when they go in and take animals out. That's, I think, the only time where DXC actually does direct action, and that's, I think, the most powerful thing they can do. When you break into a farm to shop yourself to a conveyor belt, the only law that you're challenging is trespassing and whatever laws prevent you from being really unsafe with industrial equipment.
I think, as we said, I don't know if you would listen to the whole of it. I think it came a little bit later, so I'm not sure which parts you heard or missed. I think the important thing is that as activists, we do whatever resonates with us. And so if we don't like what someone else is doing, that's okay. We don't have to kind of like tear it apart and, you know, but the important thing is to take away what you like, what you feel called to do, what you think is the best thing you can do for the animals, and just do it.
But
so as we mentioned, there are many people that aren't kind of on board with DHC, and that's super okay. It's the action that's important, not the particular person that's heading up the group or what the group's called or their strategies. They're doing what they feel is the best thing that they can do, and I think we're just all doing, each of us, the best that we can. So I think it's really important in the animal rights movement. There's a lot of division. We've got to prop ourselves up. We've got to give people a little pat on the back and say, you know, nothing's perfect. We'll make mistakes. Some things have to be done better next time, and we can reevaluate. Focus on your activism. Do whatever you feel is like the best thing to be done for the animals. Advocate for animals the same way you would want someone to be advocating for your life. So if I was strung upside down and someone's going to chop my head off, would I want Wayne to say the things he said and someone to chain themselves to the kill line to raise awareness and get media attention? Hell yeah. Right? Is it the best thing, the most perfect thing? I don't know. All I know is I just want someone to raise awareness for me. So follow your heart, do what you think's best, prop up vegan activists and giving it a go. It's better than sitting on the couch and doing nothing. Remember, if we only do what's comfortable for us, it's Nash on the beach with a coconut. Right? So there's obviously a lot of people that aren't going to do anything, a lot of people that are just going to like, you know, whatever, I'm not going to do anything. Those who are doing something, props to them.
But what
your comment, like following up with that, is I don't know how many people know this, but there's been some theories that have been studied about basically like activism and how we, not vegan specifically, just activism in general, how we create change. And it's come up a lot with different organizations that people really hate, like PETA, some people really hate PETA. Anyway, basically what was studied is that these really intensive forms of activism are actually super effective, not because people agree with them like non-vegans agree with PETA, they don't, but because it's seen as so outrageous and so like, this is ridiculous, vegans are totally crazy. And then they meet one of us and we're like, you're not, you like The Office too? Like, wow, you're like, you like going to Pizza and getting a burrito? Oh my god, you're so normal.
This happens to us all the time.
Exactly.
For example of this, when we were in, it was the 8th of April, was it? The demonstrations across Australia that we mentioned. We were in Melbourne for that particular demonstration. We went down there. And we stayed that night. The next day we got in the Uber and we were going to the airport to go back home to Brisbane. And the Uber driver was like, oh, because we had our suitcases, we come back from a tour in Israel. Yeah. And it's like, oh, so you're on vacation? Well, not really, but yeah, we're moving around. What are you doing in Melbourne? And we looked at each other and we're like, yeah, why not? It's 10 o'clock in the morning, let's go for it. You know, yesterday when the whole city was shut down and, you know, all those people were like stopping traffic and all that stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, what was that? Well, that was us. And so then we had this really long conversation, right through Melbourne traffic to the airport, nice and slow, and we normalised what he, 24 hours ago would have been going, you can stop in my traffic, and all of a sudden he's got these two really normal people in the backseat going, yes, this is what happened, and this is why we're doing it. Have you seen something? It's shocking. When you're a consumer, how do you feel about that? So we started outreaching him, and by the time we left the car, we weren't these crazy terrorists that the Prime Minister would call green-collar criminals. We were two regular people with jobs and, just a regular couple in the backseat talking about feminism. And the rights issue, we've normalised it.
Yeah,
and this is what we always talk about. No matter what the media and the politicians say, they can call us terrorists. I actually like that they call us that, but they feel so threatened that they're going to use that word, because everybody these days knows a vegan. And so your neighbour Sally is going to be talking to the dog walker Tom, whose niece, Natasha, is vegan. Oh, did you hear about those terrorists in here? But my niece Natasha's vegan, she's not like So it makes it normal.
And people are a lot more open to your ideas, saying, these people are really extreme, you're not extreme. Okay, well, suddenly eating animals seems, yeah, like that seems kind of wrong because you're not screaming at these other vegan activists, so I'm going to listen to what you have to say, even though you're going to protest me.
It's called the radical flank effect. So when you have a group like DXE, for example, who have popularised direct action in the animal rights movement, doing what the mainstream would consider extreme actions, then it makes a group like Anonymous for the Voiceless seem less extreme into the eyes of many non-vegans and something that they could perhaps warm to, for example. So that radical flank effect has actually been an integral part of many previous social justice movements.
You mentioned in your presentation many actually peaceful demonstrations or protests, and they were failed. And there are many successful illegal demonstrations. So I would say, just to me comes up many other examples that how peaceful demonstrations like Rabindranath Tagore could take over just the whole British, but just peaceful demonstrations, peaceful protests. Or I can see a lot of violence in Palestine because, you know, Israeli-Palestinian. So there are so many extremists there. Just this is their right to go to the just those lands, but they are just prevented. So they are just doing violence, and they are being called terrorists and, you know, extremists. But usually is offered just to kind of abandon those guns or those violence and then try to just come to politics and kind of make a party. And because people in Israel also are people, you know, when they see that there is no violence here, they just start to just bring people into power who are less violent, less extreme. You know, here I think we are in a democracy, and if we educate people and we show people that this thing is right, and we can bring parties to the power so that they can bring more regulation, you know, better regulations. And also, I think what Beyond Meat or Impossible Meat, those things are doing are much more effective than just, for example, going to a supermarket and just telling people, just no, don't buy this. I think when we can make some products nutritiously equivalent to meat and more, affordable, so it is much more effective than just going there. No, of course we should just ethically educate people, but that thing, I mean, just that alternative, just putting effort on that alternative, I think is much more effective.
It's all needed.
It's all needed. So we definitely need the likes of Beyond Meat products and counterparts. There's a whole industry that is working towards creating those products, which is fantastic. But the consumer aspect alone will probably not be enough to achieve animal rights. That's just going to get more people eating plant-based diets.
And the other thing to consider is, why would non-vegans choose those alternatives if they don't know anything about them? We're forcing them to acknowledge the issue. That makes them consider when they go to the store, I'll pick up this product instead of that product. Otherwise, why would they bother?
So we need all forms of activism. So as we spoke about how many different ways that we can each be active, we all don't have to be animal rights activists, as long as we're being active in our circle of influence, using our skills and interests, whatever they may be. With many examples that we gave, but we also need the animal rights activism with the various approaches. All social justice movements have used multiple strategies and multiple approaches to be successful. So,
my main point was violence and illegal.
Oh yeah, so there hasn't been a single act of violence by animal rights activists. Everyone is taking non-violent direct action, and as I mentioned earlier, history has shown us that non-violent direct action is what makes most social justice movements successful, not violent direct action.
Just because some action is illegal, that doesn't make it violent. We have to remember that.
Because legality and morality are not always synonymous. And of course, it's very difficult to change, to work within the legal system when that very system has been essentially created. Those laws have been created by the industries that we're trying to uproot. So that's why the laws have to be broken. Hence, Martin Luther King Jr. said we have that moral obligation to disobey unjust laws, because clearly the laws are unjust. when it comes to the animal victims.
I'll give you an example. I did an outreach session with an older couple that actually ended up being in a video. It was from Australia, and they were very difficult to speak with, very strong in their views. But I was shocked that this woman, not only did they know what vegan was, it wasn't just, oh, you don't eat animals, but she said, oh, you know, vegans, you don't wear leather, you don't wear wool, you don't go to zoos. I'm thinking, hey, you know, that's all right. Right? Usually it's just the young ones that are on social media, but this woman, I don't know if she's on Instagram or whatever, or Facebook, I assume she isn't, but therefore, so she's hearing things either from other people that are vegan or from mainstream. She knew that it wasn't just a diet, is my point. That means it's becoming more mainstream. For someone to know that vegans don't wear wool, we still get questions from you vegans saying, what about wool and honey? It's like, okay, let's go through all that. So it shows that it's really getting into the mainstream consciousness and discussion.
I just want to add also, it's important that we talk about animal rights and we talk about speciesism, which we're not necessarily doing when we're buying Beyond Meat burgers. So speciesism is the root of all forms of discrimination, if you like, in that it is the first form of discrimination that we are taught. When we're only a few months old and animal products are introduced into our diets by our parents or guardians, they are literally putting the dismembered body parts and secretions of these murdered animals into our mouths, and we are what we eat. They're literally becoming the cells of our body. So if we teach anti-speciesism, if you like, then it's very unlikely that those children are going to grow up and learn to discriminate in other ways, such as racism, sexism, heterosexism, etc. So if we tackle the root of speciesism, we're going to go to a long way to addressing the other forms of discrimination, like racism, like you were hinting at with Palestine and Israel and that conflict and others around the world.
So you mentioned how some religions do have meat, like it's part of religion to have meat within their culture. I was wondering, when you're outreaching, what would be the best response to someone that argues that meat is part of my religion?
Okay, so no religion on earth mandates that you have to eat animals. Therefore, it's a choice. Now, it's not a personal choice when it involves the life of someone else. Done.
Because I have a friend who's like vegan also, but then her parents claim that her religion makes them eat meat, and she's trying to educate them, but they're not listening. So I just wanted to ask.
Yeah.
In her,
it's not mandatory. No religion on earth. In fact, it actually goes against what all religions are based on. Religions are based on love and compassion and peace and all the good stuff. So there's no good stuff when we're sitting someone's throat chopping their head off. You can
also say, given that it's not mandated and it becomes a choice, as you said, it's not a personal choice if it has a direct victim, but also if we could choose to be cruel or kind, why would we choose to be cruel?
I know that most people say that it's a lot easier to outreach to people that you don't know because there's no personal relation. But I mean, obviously, when you go vegan and everybody else that you know is not, it still always comes up. But it feels like the more you talk to the people that you know, like whether it's your family or your friends or coworkers, they just kind of like, oh yeah, you do your thing, and then you're trying to So, do you have any tips for the kind of people you see in everyday life?
Yeah, that's a lot harder than outreaching people you don't know, because you walk away into that conversation. It's like the blood buddy will see you right? So it is trickier. I think it's going to be different for every single person. Your pre-existing relationships with people are very much going to impact how they react and respond to you going vegan. So it's like any other conversation that you're going to have. If they don't really take you seriously and value and you're on the same page, then that's likely to carry over with veganism. Not always for everyone, but generally speaking, that's often the case. You can't just kind of evaluate where you're at in terms of what your situation is. So if it's way too intense and you shouldn't be making every single conversation with that person in your life for 5 years, right? Or you call them, you're going to lose your job.
Well, it was more like in the beginning, like especially with my mom.
Yeah.
I'm learning all this stuff, and it's like
Yeah.
I'm getting all excited about it.
Yeah.
And she's like, don't talk about it. I don't want to hear it. Like just.
Well,
Yeah.
when we first watched Gary's speech, the very first thing we did, we cried, and we were going hysterical, and we were vegan. And because he used his speech, he said, I'm an animal rights activist, root word active. At the beginning of his speech, remember that? And that struck a chord in us so strongly. We're like, these are animal rights activists. We're going to be animal rights activists. So as soon as we finished watching the video, we wrote a letter, an email, and sent it to everybody in our contacts list. People we hadn't heard from, I don't know how long. Hello, Natasha, look here, we're not vegan. And send them a link to this video. So we have a moral obligation to share this with you. It's changed our life. Please watch it. It's 1 hour at a time. We heard back from about 3 people. Right? 1 good, 1 bad, 1 neutral. That's it. Now, was that the best approach? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. We weren't living at home with our family at that point, so I think what I'm saying is, I think when we go vegan, we're so like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever, and we just go, phew. Maybe take a step back, and maybe just go, all right, what's the best way to present this information to someone? Maybe wait a couple of weeks until you kind of, that intense emotion calms down. And then personally, I would say, Mum, I need to share something with you. I love you so much, and I know you love me, and that's why it's really important that I communicate this to you with a totally open heart. And I know that our communication has always been fantastic, and I trust you with this, and I value you, that kind of thing. Build it all up and say, will you allow me to sit down with you for a couple of hours to show you something? Because I can't believe what I've discovered. Don't even tell her what it's about. Sit down and make a cup of tea, have a few biscuits on the table, watch the minions together. Hold her hand and press play. Maybe that approach would be better. 8 years after we went vegan, maybe that approach would be better. I don't know.
I want to jump in on it.
Yeah, please.
Because like you get a lot of resistance from maybe it's your older brother or sister, your parents, and you say to them, you know, when we were kids, you decided we should go vegetarian, my older sister, because you said, we love our cats, our dogs, these are our friends, we shouldn't hurt them. Mom, you taught me to be kind.
Yeah.
Dad, you taught me not to...
It's your fault.
Yeah. I'm following through on what you taught me, and now I'm reflecting it back. And this is how I understand what I was taught as a child.
I love that. I think we're going to put that in the watch. That's really good. Yeah, beautiful.
So there's been an increasing amount of people who resonate with the environmental impact of going vegan. Can you maybe share some examples that you come across of effective direct action of focusing on environmental impact?
I guess Extinction Rebellion would be the case in point at the moment. We heard from one of the 15 co-founders of Extinction Rebellion at the recent Animal Liberation Conference that we went to. He Skyped in, I think his name was Roger Hammond or something like that. Anyway, they spent about 2 years researching previous social justice movements and what has been most effective. And in their opinion, what we need to do is actually occupy central cities of power, for example. So, for example, imagine blocking entrances, main entrances to San Francisco, where you've got the Silicon Valley and all the money and everything like that. Where you're interrupting and disrupting businesses for hours at a time or days at a time.
You said about 2 weeks, like you really want to make an impact.
Yeah, where they're losing millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's when you're going to hit them where it hurts. So for example, in October, they're planning massive occupations. They now have 100,000 people on their mailing list. And I know that the animal rights group Surge Activism from the UK, which led by Earthling Ed and his girlfriend Luna and others, they've been in talks with Extinction Rebellion.
Was that confirmed that it was Surge?
Yeah, I confirmed it with somebody else. I'll have to say. I'll take it. So, for example, at the official Animal Rights March in London this year in August, they're going to have a sit-in as part of the march, which will be a practice run for joining forces with Extinction Rebellion in October to shut down London.
Now let's see if the march this year gets media attention compared to last year's, as we mentioned, 10,000 marching legally, inexplicably nothing. If they do a sit-in, I bet you they're going to get attention.
Yeah.
Right? So it was really interesting listening to this guy talk at the ALC. We wrote down a whole heap of notes. Actually, we're going to make a whole podcast episode on it because it was so interesting. Of how we can learn from what they did, which they've just learned from other groups. So it's a constant learning process, trial and error, what works and how can we improve, and bringing that together in animal rights. And of course, there's such a strong tie, obviously, with the climate movement. I mean, join forces and let's do this, right? But it was interesting that he said that we need to bring, as Luca said, bring the battle or the disruption to the cities. So yes, it's important that we also go to the farms and the factory farms and the slaughterhouses out in rural areas, but people in the cities are not being disrupted by that. So we need to bring that to them. We are relying on media coming out with us and filming or sharing that, documenting that, which does work for victims, but everyday people are not disrupted or not forced necessarily to really pay attention and have their will disrupted by it.
On Monday, the 8th of April, when we had Dominion disruptions in Melbourne that we took part of, when we blocked the main intersection there in the Central Prison District at Swanson Street and Flinders Street, that's when we disrupted people's morning routines and we prevented them a lot. Some of them were late to work as a result, and then therefore they would have to explain it to their bosses, and it generates controversy and conversation and things like that. So we basically forced them to pay attention to the issue that we wanted, which was animal rights and police watching, etc. So yeah, disruption, we have to disrupt people's normal routines for sure.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm giving it to International, and this older gentleman, he was like super supportive. I thought he was vegan. He was like, good on you guys, like, I'm really proud of you guys. I really respect your video. Like, I'm going to do everything too. He's like, no, but I really support what you're doing. I respect your decisions and stuff. What do you say?
Oh, we had this discussion like 2 days ago leaving Berkeley. We were waiting for our Uber, and the guy that was living next door to our Airbnb asked where we were going, talking about the conference and blah, blah, blah. And he was doing the same thing. I respect that. My girlfriend and my daughter are both vegan, and I was, so respectful of that. But he wasn't vegan. And so we were actually talking about this on the train. Like, how are we going to do this? What did we come up with?
Well, I was asking, why do you say that?
Like, why do you respect it?
Because then that forces them to acknowledge that what they're doing is disrespectful to animals in some way. But hear it from them. Let them explain themselves.
I think we also came up with, thank you so much. The biggest or the most gratitude you can give is by not exploiting and eating the animals that we're trying to defend. That's how you can help out the movement. With a smile. You've got to have that smile.
More than your gratitude, we'd actually love you to put us out of a job.
Yes, that's what we came up with. Put us out of a job. We don't want to be doing this. We don't want to be staying outside of slaughterhouses. So consumers are forcing us in a position where we have to defend the victims. So please put us out of a job. It's but it's good. Like sometimes like using a bit of reverse psychology, a little bit of humour, just breaks the ice and really makes people think. And I think humour is greatly underrated when we do outreach. And although I think you have to have the right type of personality, like a little bit of sarcasm, you can't do sarcasm. It comes across too But if you can use a bit of sarcasm, a little bit of humour, again with a smile, it's like, oh, it really hits them, but I can't really hate her because it's kind of funny, but it's shocking, but not.
The smiling assassin.
So you can try it, see if it works. Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you so much. All the actions that are coming up, the Cube, the Vigil, the Disruption, the Dominion screening, the March, all on Beacon Couples Facebook, click on events, all the details are there. See you this week. Thank you.